with a narcissist, and this is part of the co-parenting with a narcissist masterclass. So we're going to look at it from a co-parenting perspective. So let's start off with some really essential understanding of some of the terminology around communication styles, particularly in narcissistic abusive relationships. Now, you may have come across these, you may already know them, but for anyone who's just starting out on this journey, it's important that you know these words, because when you do a Google search, these things might come up, or other people might say them in videos. And so I'm just going to give you a brief outline of some of the terminology, what it means, so that you've got an understanding. And it'll also give you an understanding of the communication style of a narcissistic ex. So let's start with gaslighting. So gaslighting is essentially distorting your reality. It's crazy making. It's saying one thing at one moment and then switching it and then denying that they said the first thing. You know that you heard it, but the more that you say that you know it, they deny it, and then you start to think, did I really hear it? And that's an ongoing pattern of communication from them. And it's all, one, it's designed to protect them from any mistakes that they've made, any lies that they've told, but it's also to disorient you. It's to leave you on wobbly, shaky ground so that you're less inclined to be strong and be your true self. Therefore, they can control you more. With someone, see it in cults, one person gets to dictate what the truth is, and they deliberately, at the start, will distort something that we all know is the absolute truth. So they will hammer. The sky is not blue. The sky is actually red. And they'll give you all sorts of fancy explanations, but it's to completely break away your sense of reality, what you believe in, what you know to be true. Because what they'll do is, if you don't believe this, you can't be part of the cult, or in this case, if you don't go along with this, then you're in trouble. So you go along with it, and then that becomes your truth. And then, like I say, it's just that repetitive behavior, and it's part of that control process, so that they can then ask you to do things that you wouldn't be comfortable doing. They can pretty much tell you whatever they want, and you just have no choice other to believe them. So it's coupled with behavior, it's coupled with that conditioning behavior of positive and negative rewards. So when you follow their untruth, you get rewarded with acceptance and maybe with affection, or, just something that is, yes, you got that right, well done, keep thinking along that path. When you get it wrong, you get withdrawal of any affection, you get anger, you get punished, you get belittled. So you're conditioned to just basically do whatever they say, because you've learned. And part of the the recovery process for when you come out of it is untangling that of what was the truth and what was a lie. And some of it's more obvious than others, but it's that it creates that unshaky foundation for you. It's like being on quicksand. You don't know what's real and what's not anymore. So that's gaslighting. Projection is actually something we all do from time to time, but with narcissists, it's consistent. They do it all the time because they can't deal with their inner emotional world. So they will blame you, or put their inner world feelings onto you. So if they're feeling guilt or blame, guilt or shame or anger or anything negative that makes them very uncomfortable, they'll say that you're feeling that, and then you're making them feel that. So it's all about them putting what's going on in them out onto you and blaming you for it. And they'll do that with behavior as well. So if they're doing something, they'll claim you're doing it to them. And you find this in the court process a lot, is usually one party will be professing their innocence and that they are the victim and accusing the other party of all these things, when actually it's them that has done a lot of those behaviours. And that's projection. So it's them projecting out their inner world, and that includes behaviours. Love bombing. So once you've split up with them, you might start to recognise some of the behaviours that you saw at the start of the relationship that actually got you into that relationship. So the good stuff, the kindness, the funniness, the charm, the loving, the affection, they might suddenly bring that out the closet, and it's all again to disorient you and regain control. So don't fall for it. It is about them getting what they want. So they might come back professing, I've changed, I am doing this, I've booked in with a therapist and I'm working through this stuff because I love you more than anything, and I want this to work, and I want us to be a family, and it all sounds great. And I think on some level they want to believe that, but they're just not capable of doing the things necessary in order to change. Unless they did go to therapy for years, and I mean years, that's how long it takes to work through a personality disorder and put coping mechanisms in place and change behaviour, then a few sessions with a therapist isn't going to change anything. Booking onto an anger management course isn't going to change anything. Booking in, suddenly deciding that they're going to do Reiki and they found God or something, that is not going to change a personality disorder. These are ingrained from childhood. And so if they come at you saying all of that, this wonderful stuff that you want to hear of how they're different and how you're the best thing that ever happened to them, and they don't want to lose you and they'll do whatever it takes, it's love bombing. Also known as hoovering as well. So hoovering similar in as much as when they want something, they will bring on the nice stuff. They'll try and suck you back into their dynamic. And their dynamic is that drama triangle. So when you start putting boundaries in place, when you start to feel stronger, you put yourself first, you don't accept any bullshit, you are being more assertive, then they might start to hoover. And like I say, by hoovering, I'm not talking about necessarily wanting to get back in the relationship, but what they are doing is trying to lure you into a false sense of security. Boom. So then they can strike. So it might be around child arrangement orders. Suddenly they might start saying, look, let's just calm this all down. We don't want to go through solicitors. We don't want to spend all of this money. I'm sure you and me could come to some sort of agreement. And you're thinking, great. I don't really want to spend all that money in court. I don't want it for the kids, all of that kind of stuff. And you open the door for a conversation. Boom! You are wiped out, because what comes next is all the old behaviour. And you sit there going, oh my God, how did that happen? Why did I allow that to happen? It's relapse. As part of the addiction cycle of a trauma body, it's that relapse. You want to believe the best in people. We all want to believe the best in people, and we want the easiest route to happiness and freedom and ease and joy. And so when someone's offering that to them, even though we know they're probably not trusted, we kind of can be tempted to go for it. Obviously, once we learn more about them, and hopefully this course will help you to understand more about that, we'll realise actually the fastest way to all of those things that I want is to not rely on them for any of those things, and to be very cautious of any attempts to be kind from them. Not saying that they're not kind sometimes, but usually there's an ulterior motive for it. So that's hoovering, is that trying to suck you back in. Grey rock. So you'll hear grey rock quite a lot, and that is the principle being, be as interesting as a grey rock. So nothing emotional. What they feed off is your emotions, because what they're looking for internally, what they're looking for is someone to regulate their emotional world for them, their emotional landscape. They weren't given those skills as children. They weren't taught them as children. And so when they feel shaky, when they feel overly emotional, like a wave of emotion coming over them, they need someone to cling to make that better. But obviously they're adults, and we need to learn to self-regulate. And whilst we all do that, sometimes we all do reach for someone else to try and help us regulate. Actually, when they do that all the time, they are completely incapable of self-regulating. And so no matter what emotion you give out, that is what they're needing from you. So you are still connected to them. Every time you tell them that you're pissed off, even if you don't verbally say, I'm really angry, your tone, your language, your body language, it will all communicate with them. Yes, that's emotion, and that feeds them. So we call it supply sometimes. That's what it is. It's emotions. It's the energy of your emotion that they are feeding into. So when you grey rock communicate, it's about taking out your emotion. And for those of you that are new at this, get a friend. Get a friend to read through any responses, or, there's Facebook groups or communities. Write out what you would like to say, and then cross out anything that indicates any of your emotions. So you're essentially just left with fact. I'm going to talk about a different way of communicating in a minute, but that's what a principle is to take all of your emotion out and just report on fact. What people sometimes find is it can then become quite harsh in the way they speak. So again, we'll look at different ways, another way of communicating which is more suited for the court environment, so that you're not at risk of being accused of being difficult or controlling in your communication. But just remember, whenever you have any interactions with them, don't give them your emotions. Deep breathing, regulate your own nervous system first, so that you are not feeding out your emotion to them. I'm going to talk about two words that are important. You may not have heard them, but they are important in terms of the parenting. And the first one is enmeshed parenting. Essentially what enmeshed parenting means is blurred boundaries. So don't quite know where parent and child ends. So you see this, like, child becomes mini version of the narcissist. They think like them, they speak like them, they want the same things as them, even when you kids that love My Little Pony or football suddenly decide they don't like those things. They like train watching because that's what parent does, or they like whatever. They just change. They become a mini version, co-narcissistic, and that's enmeshed parenting. And this is part of alienating behaviors, and that's the other word I'm going to talk about, is alienating behaviors, which I've talked about in a previous video. But when a child almost identifies as being narcissistic, coexisting with that parent, then they're going to reject the other parent, because that can't exist at the same time as that enmeshed relationship, because the anxiety that your relationship with your child induces in the other parent, the child feels it because there's no boundaries, no emotional boundaries. So that child has become the regulatory object for that parent. And so your presence makes the other parent feel anxious. The child, because they've got those blurred boundaries, feels that anxiety and blames you for it. So then goes, I can't have anything to do with you because you make me feel anxious. When actually, that's not what's happening. What's happening is the other parent has the anxiety, but the child's feeling it. And because the child is co-regulating with the parent rather than the parent co-regulating with the child knows they can't have those emotions, so they've got to calm it down. And that's enmeshed, and that's the crux of a lot of alienating behaviours, is that emotional enmeshment. So yeah, it's important that you understand that. So next up, I want to talk about ego states, and this is important for the communication, is when you've been in a narcissistic relationship, you've probably found that narcissists will communicate from like a parental tone. So their ego is, I'm more important than you, I'm more powerful than you should listen to what I say. You know, like a parent, a critical parent, an authoritative parent or authoritarian parent would say, is do as I say, not as I do. You know, just listen to everything I have to say. And you've been in that relationship and you've probably felt like that. So you've been quite passive. So you've been what we call you communicate in a style which is an adaptive child. So you just adapt to that environment. You do as you are told. When you come out of that relationship, two things can happen. One, they can continue to try and talk to you in that same way, very critically, always putting you down. You go from being the adaptive child of I do everything you say, yes, just to keep the peace, to the rebel child, which is screw you, I'm going to do things my way. Blah, that kind of behaviour. Obviously, neither of those are healthy. And when it's seen through another lens, through the court, you both look problematic. You both look like you've got issues that you're bringing to the table. So it's not clear where the dynamics are. What they will also do within court is they will switch from looking like a critical parent to looking like the adapted child. It won't be that. That's not what's going on. What they're doing is communicating from a passive aggressive style. So they'll pretend to be the victim through their words, but actually if you understand the language and you really listen to it, actually they are still being critical. They're just presenting it in a childlike way. But anyway, the aim is for you, because they're not capable. They will either communicate from that critical adult having a go at you all the time, or they will present as being childlike in their communication. Very much oh, you've got to protect me, you've got to look after me. That's not really what's happening, but that's how it will present. If you switch when they do the childlike thing to be the critical parent, then that's where you get the blame. It's all on you. You are the problem, you are the fault. When you switch to the middle ground, which is adult, which is respectful, which is empathetic, which is compassionate, and I'm not saying towards them, what I'm saying is your communication style. So when you communicate with other people, when you communicate in the court process, your language is softer. It's not passive, but it's not aggressive either. It sits in that middle of adult. So as an adult, you know everyone has a different opinion and you are respectful of everyone's opinion. What you're trying to find is that sweet spot in the middle. And that's kind of where you need to stand so that you can reveal the dynamics of the communication in other people. When you get drawn in, then you, like I say, you can end up looking like either the problem or at least half of the problem. But when you sit in that adult ego state, then that's when everyone else can see their behavior for what it is. So the BIF communication style, which is a more court-friendly approach than Grey Rock, it takes it a little bit further, is brief, informative, friendly, but firm, and it's that adult state. So you don't need to send long essays. You don't need to explain your reasons why. You don't need to apologize. And you don't need to admonish the other parent, so you don't need to put the other parent down. You're just brief, informative, friendly, but firm. And when you are those things, you are able to communicate in a way that the court can see. You're not being difficult. You're not being obstructive, because you're being friendly, but you are being firm. So you're communicating your boundaries. You're brief and informative, so no emotional. So you're doing the grey rock. So just remember Biff, B-I-F-F. Brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And again, what if you're practicing this? Get a friend, give them that framework. If you're doing this through the co-parenting with a Narcissist Masterclass, there will be a communication guide available which has this as a framework. So every communication you have, you can fill in these boxes so you know that what you send is within that range. So I'm going to just quickly talk about assertiveness on the back of that. So as I stated, when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, you have been in that adaptive child, which is also very passive. So it's don't want to create a fuss. You're very people pleasing. You stay quiet. You don't really speak your mind, and you don't express what you want and need in a relationship. The other parent, your ex, is more aggressive in their parenting style, in their communication style, sorry. So they're very clear on, I need you to do this. Now, it might change, so it's not always clear, the goalposts move, but actually at that moment, you know, I've got to respond to them. They all your effort are to meet their needs, and they're very aggressive in their pursuit of getting you to meet their needs. When you come out of that relationship, the tendency for a lot of people, and this gets them into trouble, is to go from being passive, which is, I haven't really got a voice, don't know what to say, to being, rah, I have a voice now, and I'm going to tell everyone, and rah, rah, rah. What that looks like is then that aggressive communication style, which obviously they will then play off that. So they'll bait you in the background, but then when everyone's watching, boom, they'll shift to seemingly being very passive. Again, it will be passive aggressive, but it might look passive to someone who doesn't understand. So you then look like the problem. You look like you're the aggressor when actually they are. And so again, it's about assertiveness, and assertiveness is acknowledging what your needs and wants are and knowing that you deserve to have them met, being able to clearly state, this is what I need, being respectful. So again, remembering Biff, but also, this is what I need, recognizing the other person has needs as well, but being clear on your language and remembering respectful, being about your needs. And again, in the Communicating with a Narcissist Masterclass, I will provide a framework for assertive communication as well, so that you can start to practice this. Because let's face it, we're not, we didn't get into these relationships because we're assertive with our communication, particularly in relationships, intimate relationships. And this will come from our family of origin. We have learned to stay quiet. We have learned that, other people's voices are more important than ours. We are way down the pecking order. And so obviously when we come out of that, we think, okay, actually I am worthy and I am deserving, and boom, I'm going to shout and scream and tell everyone what's gone on, when actually that, I'd say, paints you in a bad light. So it's learning to be assertive, and it's a skill, and it's something you're going to have to practice. And part of assertiveness is saying no and setting boundaries, and we will look at that in more detail in coming weeks. Finally, communicating with your child. So your ex will try and triangulate the children into conversations, so especially when you start to put boundaries in place. But they will also, because they have that enmeshed bound, they need the child to be their regulatory object. They need them to make them feel better, to regulate that internal landscape, emotional landscape. The children will start to play that role. So they might parentify them, so they raise them in the hierarchy of the family, which is parents at the top, children underneath, because of the cognitive and experience and physical nature that we're older and supposedly wiser and bigger and stronger, and so we're meant to be at the top and the children are underneath, so we take care of them and we nurture them and we raise them to be adults in their own relationship. When you separate, a narcissist will, boom, elevate one of those children into a co-spouse role. So they'll take on the role that you had. And like I say, that will be that emotional thermometer, really. So when the narcissist starts to wobble with their emotions, that child will come to the rescue and make them feel better. And that can impact the way that your children communicate with you, because they'll see themselves as equals. So suddenly they won't respect you as much because you might have slipped down the pecking order a little bit. So they might talk down to you, they might be disrespectful. And so it's important that you understand what is going on behind the scenes, those dynamics, because ultimately what you need to help your children with is that co-regulation process. So you need to be modeling in your home, you being able to manage your own emotions and regulate yourself first. That's the first thing. Regulate your own emotions. Then when your children come at you with disrespect or anger or sadness or whatever emotion they're bringing, you can then stay firm in your emotional landscape and help them to deal with their emotions. And that's co-regulation. Because they're not getting that at the other house. What they're getting is the other parent feels bad, they have to regulate them, so their own emotions don't get dealt with. So when they come to you, they're more likely to be highly emotionally charged because they've got no one to regulate with anywhere else. So they come to you and they're all over the place. They might be, like I say, angry, anxious, sad, any combination. And so for you, the most important thing you could do is regulate your own emotions so you can then co-regulate with them, which gives them the skills to self-regulate. So these are really important skills, lifelong skills that you're giving them. And that's the most important thing you can do with your communication, is communicate from a regulated state for you and through co-regulation. This is all things that we cover in our Circle of Security Parenting program. It is all about co-regulation. Also, the Neuro-Resiliency Toolkit will help you to regulate your emotions. So I'll pop those in the link once the video is processed and everything. But there we go. Thank you for those of you that have watched. If there's any questions, do pop them up. If not, pop them up after and I will respond to them. But yeah, interesting week communicating. And obviously there's, lots of individual questions that I'm sure people have, but I hope that I've covered the bulk of it for you. But take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.